how you treat your body during pregnancy is going to affect your delivery, because that was 9 months of how you were feeling, how you were moving. And then all of a sudden, push comes to shove. Literally, you have to push a baby out and your body's having a hard time because the last 9 months, maybe you weren't eating enough calories or you weren't hydrating enough. And so now your body is like, well, what am I supposed to do during this marathon of labor when I don't have enough? And I don't want to come at this from a place of shame or fear mongering or anything like that. This is just to say, your doctor's not telling you this. Your doctor isn't telling you this when you're in your trying to conceive phase. They're definitely not talking about this while you're pregnant. They're just making sure that you're not going to die while you're pregnant. That's their job. If we can draw attention to this idea that we need to build these habits and these principles now, it will completely change the trajectory of everything we experience as moms.
All right. With me today, I have Brooke Harmer, and she is a certified prenatal nutritionist who empowers moms to take a proactive approach to their health through holistic nutrition and lifestyle habits. Her work blends scientific research with ancient wisdom to help moms work with their medical providers and their bodies to thrive during pregnancy and postpartum. She's the author of 2 best-selling cookbooks, host of a top 50 podcast, and has become a trusted voice in the mama community for all things health and wellness. So with that, hello and welcome to the podcast, Brooke. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, me too. I feel like we have a ton of really awesome things to discuss today. And I'm just excited that you're here because I feel like this is a topic that every mom deals with, whether that's prenatal, during pregnancy, postpartum, like we're constantly talking about all these kinds of things. And I know it's something that I get a lot of questions about. So I'm really, really excited to be going over this today. With that, why don't we talk about, can you tell us how you got started and what you do and why you're so passionate about it?
Yes. I actually got into all of this because I became a mom 4 years ago yesterday. Actually, my son turned 4 yesterday. I realized during pregnancy, you have all these appointments, you have all this advice, you have all the mommy blogs, you have the bump, you have what to expect when you're expecting, all these resources, and everyone is like so on top of taking care of pregnant women. And then all of a sudden you give birth and like everything disappears. You have no postpartum support. You have like one visit from a lactation consultant in the hospital. You have one postpartum appointment and you're just like left to fend for yourself. And you're like, I don't know what's going on with my body. I don't know how I'm producing milk all of a sudden. I don't know if like this whole breastfeeding thing is working. How do I take care of a human being? Like all that stuff. Just super overwhelming. And at the time, we were newlyweds, poor college students, and my husband had just enlisted in the military. So we literally had no money for any of the experts to help us. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll just try and see if like diet and lifestyle like makes a difference in all these problems I'm having, like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, low milk supply, insomnia, all these things. Turns out it has a really big impact on how well you do postpartum. And so I slowly transitioned from being a full-time food blogger to now focusing more on like recipes and nutrition for moms. Eventually got to the point where I realized that we just needed more education. It wasn't necessarily, oh, eat this food because it'll help your milk supply. It's we need to learn how to nourish our bodies foundationally as moms so that lactation comes easy. Postpartum recovery actually works. Pregnancy doesn't suck so much. Labor and delivery is a breeze, right? Like understanding how to take care of our bodies through all these stages. And so now, as the well-nourished mama, I focus mostly on education, debunking myths, showing moms that pregnancy doesn't have to be horrible. You don't have to have these chronic illnesses postpartum. And some of that application is through nutrition, of course, but really just empowering moms with the education that we have lacked for so long that is still evidence-based, but rooted in root cause care, not just symptom management.
I love that. This is kind of like the new thing. I don't want to say new thing, but it's like I find myself talking about this a lot right now. And that is nutrition, because it does play such a vital role in every single part of what we do. And so even like in my birth course, the first thing we go over is nutrition and movement, nutrition and exercise, right? But because it sets the foundation for everything, because you can keep yourself from having very serious things and complications that happen during pregnancy and birth and postpartum. So I love that you're talking about that. And I like that you're bringing in the evidence for it. And two, as you were saying that, I'm like, it's so true because we're pregnant, we go to the hospital, we have a baby, we come back, and it's just, I mean, it's a whirlwind. And we don't have that village built in like we used to. We don't live close to families, or we're military, or whatever the case. And so it does make it a little trickier. We kind of have to learn this stuff on our own. And hopefully as we learn, we're passing that information on to other people and serving and loving them. And it'll be great for our grandkids as well, but or our children. But it is vital. Like, this stuff really, really matters. So I love that you're talking about it. Do you have like a kind of, just leading into our interview here, do you have some things that you're like, as you are preparing prenatally, as you are pregnant, as you are postpartum, do you have like either lists of foods, or how do you go about teaching this in a way where moms are like, yes, I know exactly what I can, what I should be eating, how much, all of that, like as they walk through those stages of life?
Yeah, it's really a lot simpler than we've been led to believe. There's those recommendations where they say don't eat raw fish, don't eat half-cooked eggs, like don't eat deli meat, whatever, whatever, whatever. And instead of giving you a bunch of lists of, okay, these foods are safe, these foods are not safe, there is some merit to that, but the approach that I like to take with my mamas to make it really, really simple and less overwhelming is to just say, focus on whole foods, focus on having most of your meals at home where you are the one cooking, you are the one preparing the food, and try your best to incorporate animal products. I know that there are some mamas who are vegetarian or vegan for religious reasons, and I totally respect that. But if there's one time in your life where animal products matter the most, it's during your perinatal years where you are sustaining human life with your body. And so if you have the luxury of choosing to eat animal products, I would say that would be a really, really big one. So um, red meat, fish, chicken, turkey, eggs, whole fat dairy. That's another thing, is a lot of women are like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm not gaining too much weight, so I'm going to eat
Mm,
fat-free
mm,
yogurt or
right.
whatever. And it's so, so, so important to have the whole fat dairy because we need the calories. We need the healthy fats from the dairy for our brain, for our hormones, for our metabolism, and also for baby's development. So to wrap it all up, I would just say focus on whole foods, eat at home, and do what you can to really have a variety of foods in your diet. And those are principles that can carry you through all stages of motherhood. We don't need to say, okay, these foods are for pregnancy, these foods are for postpartum. It's really just these foundational principles, and we can kind of tweak them here and there depending on what your individual health requires.
Yeah, I like that. I like the simplicity of it too when you're thinking about how to fuel yourself. Like, if you're like, okay, I'm focusing on animal products and making sure I have enough protein in some of these simple things, then it's like I don't have to go recipe digging and meal planning and all of this kind of stuff. It really does keep it simple, where it's like I'm going to make some kind of meat, and then if I feel like some fruit or veggie or whatever on the side, then like great, but like we've got our focus and we can kind of move forward, and it builds all those building blocks that we need. So I love the simplicity of it too, especially for busy moms. We're in our heads enough. We're like trying to figure out life enough that food should not be the thing that like stresses us out. It should be helpful to us. So I like
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. How about, I just want to move into a second, like talking about fueling for labor. So
Mm.
this is a question like a lot of moms have, and they're like, what can I bring with me? What do I, well, first of all, and you kind of touched on this, but do you have specific examples or kind of thoughts on how fueling your body during pregnancy affects your labor? Because you kind of touched on that. And then I want to bring it into, and what can we eat during labor? Because we know we need that strength and stamina and energy and all of that happens during that process.
Yes, I love this question. So the way that we nourish ourselves during pregnancy 100% impacts our delivery, because if we develop complications like gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, there's a whole bunch of other ones, but if you develop complications like that, it's going to affect the choices that you have during your delivery. So let's say you develop hypertension or early onset preeclampsia, you might have to be induced. And so that means there's going to be a lot more medications involved. There's going to be more restrictions on movement during labor. And so how much you're able to move and adjust your positioning and all of that stuff is going to be affected. You might have more interventions. And we're not really thinking about that at the beginning of pregnancy. And this isn't to say that, like, if you had sugar at, like, if you had a big birthday cake at 14 weeks pregnant, that's the reason that you have gestational diabetes. And that's the reason that XYZ. Like, I'm not saying that, but it's our habits over years and years. Here's the other thing. Okay, hold on. I'm going to backtrack for a second.
Yes.
A lot of women think that the complications that they have or the symptoms that they have during pregnancy are just random.
And
that
please touch on this, please.
It's just because you're pregnant, right? That's what you're going to be told. They're like, oh, some women just have this. Okay, so here's what I need you to understand. Your habits that you've had for the last 2 or 3 years have maybe not really been a problem until all of a sudden your body is now doing double the work. It's in overdrive to take care of you and create human life from scratch. And so now your body is maxed out. And so now you're going to see symptoms come up and you're going to see complications come up that maybe you weren't expecting that were, quote, triggered by pregnancy, but it was because of the habits that you had prior to that. Sometimes things can just happen. We know that. But it's what I really want to bring home is this idea that it's how we live our lives on a daily basis over a period of time that really start to add up. So how you treat your body during pregnancy is going to affect your delivery because that was 9 months of how you were feeling, how you were moving. And then all of a sudden, push comes to shove. Literally, you have to push a baby out and your body's having a hard time because the last 9 months, maybe you weren't eating enough calories or you weren't hydrating enough. And so now your body is like, well, what am I supposed to do during this marathon of labor when I don't have enough? And I don't want to come at this from a place of shame or fear mongering or anything like that. This is just to say your doctor's not telling you this.
Mm-hmm.
Your doctor isn't telling you this when you're in your trying to conceive phase. They're definitely not talking about this while you're pregnant. They're just making sure that you're not going to die while you're pregnant. That's their job.
Right.
And so if we can draw attention to this idea that we need to build these habits and these principles now, it will completely change the trajectory of everything we experience as moms. So now going into labor. If you are low risk and you don't have a lot of complications, you have a lot more options of what you're able to do. Current hospital policy, unfortunately, still says that they don't want women eating during labor. I think it was 2015 or 2016 that I'm trying to remember which organization it was. I should have checked this before we jumped on, but it was either the National OBGYN people or some of the anesthesiologist people, one of those groups changed their recommendation and said, if you are low risk going into labor and delivery at the hospital, you can eat food. Unfortunately, those guidelines have not been officially updated nationally.
Right.
And so you're still going to hear people say, oh, NPO, clear liquids only, whatever. If you are low risk and you've had a conversation with your doctor, I highly, highly recommend eating during labor because it will give your body the fuel that it needs to get through contractions. It'll make sure that your muscles have energy to continue to contract. It will make sure that you have the stamina to get through pushing and whatever else is going on. And it will make sure that your body has enough energy to not get tired, to not slow down, and to not to minimize your risk of intervention and complication that would otherwise end up in a C-section or something unfortunate. So if you are low risk, I highly recommend eating food. Bring protein and fat heavy snacks in the beginning for that long lasting energy. And then once you get into active labor where you can't quite talk through your contractions and you have to take a second, kind of go into your la la land, that's when you're going to need your honey and your fruit and your quick energy sources to get you through. And then you'll be ready to go for delivery.
Yeah. I love that because I always tell moms, and I've said this for a long time. I'm like, when you are getting ready to head into the hospital, and if you are not allowed to eat anything when you are there, like it is time to go fuel yourself on the way, right? Burger, fries, and shake, or like think like good amounts of like good protein, and filling yourself before you head in, and then I always recommend that they bring, a couple of snacks or whatever and hand it to dad, have dad holding it and take a bite as needed. But here's the thing, and it's so like opinion based, and I love that you're bringing that up. First of all, any kind of policy that's looking to be changed, I mean, it takes years, decades for that to become a natural, normal thing that you see in all the hospitals or even start hearing about. So that makes sense that if they said it in 2015, it floated off into the universe, for the next decade, we probably won't hear about it. But the other thing is, when we see moms that give birth at home or out of hospital and they're with other providers, like eating is part of the process. They're like, what can I make for you? What sounds good right now? Here, like make sure you're feeling yourself, because the amount of energy, like you talked about this marathon, it's literally the amount of energy that you need to run a marathon is what you use to birth your baby. So it's so silly to think that you would not fuel that body prior to and during labor to be able to get through that. And that includes, water. Like if you have an IV and they're like, you can't sip anything, it's just so crazy to me that you wouldn't like eat and drink during labor. So yes, I agree with you 100%. I also like your ideas of like protein in the beginning, those quick energy sources, honey and fruit and stuff as you go. I think all of that makes perfect sense. So that's if moms are listening right now, get the notepad out. These are the notes that you want. I love this so much.
I also want to add really quick, if you are a mama who plans on getting an epidural, just because you can't feel the intensity of your contractions and just because you don't feel like you're working really hard doesn't mean that you aren't working really hard. So if you are planning on getting an epidural, your body still needs all of that fuel, even though you don't feel like you're expending a lot of energy. You're just numb to it. The energy is still happening. The contractions, the intensity that your body is going through is still happening. You're just numb to it. So you still are going to need that fuel, even if you're planning on getting an epidural.
I love that you shared that. That's so true. Okay, how about, since we're talking about like birth and all of this, how does the type of birth that we experience, how does that change our postpartum recovery?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So let's start with the vaginal delivery, regardless of whether it's at the hospital or at a birthing center or at home. Vaginal delivery, even if you tear, is going to be a more gentle postpartum recovery just because there was probably less medication involved. There was probably less intervention involved. And so you're going to be able to move a little bit sooner, but you're still going to need really, really, really targeted nutrition. If you had a cesarean for whatever reason, you 100% were given antibiotics. We know from observational studies and also just gathered research that moms who have C-sections are at higher risk for developing chronic disease, autoimmune illness, a whole slew of gut problems postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
And their babies are also at higher risk for developing things like asthma, eczema, quote, colic, which isn't a thing, but you're more likely to have a colicky baby if you had a cesarean because of the antibiotics. The antibiotics basically neutralized all of your immune system and all of the good and bad bacteria in your body, in your gut, in your vaginal canal, all of that stuff. And if we are not super intentional about how we are nourishing ourselves those first 6-8 weeks postpartum, then we are kind of left with whatever our body can conjure, and it's probably not going to be enough of the good stuff. It's kind of like if you went into a garden and just like torched everything, but you didn't try to take care of the soil after torching everything, you're more likely to go grow weeds before you grow vegetables and plants and flowers, right? It's not that you can't ever grow the good stuff ever again, But if you just go in and obliterate everything, you're probably going to get weeds before you get something beautiful and nourishing. And that's what antibiotics do. They're necessary, they're important, they're a part of the process. And we have to know how to take care of our body if we receive antibiotics during labor.
Okay, two questions. One, I know moms are going to want to know about this colic comment that colic doesn't exist. I want to hear all about that. And then two would be, okay, how do we repopulate the good stuff?
Okay, so colic. I like to describe colic kind of like IBS,
Mm,
where IBS is a joke of a diagnosis because it basically just means ouchy tummy. They don't know why you have an ouchy tummy. They don't know how to fix your ouchy tummy. They just say, oh, you have ouchy tummy. That's what my husband calls it.
I like it.
I feel like colic is the same thing where they're like, oh, your baby's really irritable. Your baby's really sad. That's unfortunate. And you're like, well, would you like to explain why? And, they have bottles that are like, oh, these are anti-colic bottles. That's not a thing. Getting a couple extra bubbles when you're feeding your baby with a bottle is not the reason they have colic. Colic, in my opinion, is the manifestation of something deeper going on. It could be that your baby's gut just can't handle the food that it's being given because they don't have a strong gut because they were given antibiotics, or mama had a rough time with her health. And when she's breastfeeding, because her body's not quite okay, it's now being transferred to baby. Believe it or not, that's a thing. If mama has gut problems, her baby's going to have gut problems if the baby is breastfed. So that's why our nutrition is super important. So if your baby has colic, I would look into supporting mama's gut health. I would visit a chiropractor that is certified in infant care to see if there's any tension from birth. That's another thing that we don't talk about enough is the type of birth affects your baby physically, because if you were pushing for 3 hours, your baby was like really, really squished in the vaginal canal for a long time, and they're going to be really tight. Their shoulders are going to be tight. Their back is going to be stiff. They might have a preference of one side or the other when they turn their head. And I know this isn't nutrition related, but it all comes back to the idea that colic is just telling you that there's something deeper going on with your baby and they're uncomfortable and we need to figure out why. And one of the really big reasons they can have colic is because of gut imbalances. If they were given antibiotics or if mama's having a hard time, we're going to see that in baby as well. So really making sure that as the mom, we are very intentional about how we're nourishing our body is going to be huge. So now to follow up with that, if we were given antibiotics during labor for whatever reason, the most important thing is to make sure that the foods that we are eating are warm, cooked, packed with herbs, and also really, really rich in minerals. So this means we are not eating salads. We're not eating smoothies. We're not eating raw vegetables, cold things. That is just going to make it so much harder for our stomach to do all the work that it has to do to digest our food. And our stomach is already having a hard time. Another really great thing is bone broth. I know bone broth isn't the most sexy thing to sip on, and it doesn't taste super great. So what I always recommend is grabbing the powdered bone broth from Just Ingredients. It's just like a little scoop of powder that you can add to water or to bone broth that you buy from the store. They have a tomato basil flavor and a lemon herb flavor. Both of them are super great, and it makes it actually palatable to drink bone broth, and it's still got all of the nutrients, the amino acids, the minerals, the protein, all of that stuff that we need. Bone broth is really, really great for supporting our gut lining and making sure that our gut stays closed so that everything that goes in our gut stays there until it's supposed to go elsewhere. So really focusing on rebuilding our gut lining And focusing on foods, like I said, that are warm and cooked is going to be huge for supporting our body as it heals from delivery and also antibiotics.
How about like we hear, if you've had antibiotics, it's a really good idea to have a really good probiotic postpartum. Do you support like probiotics, and what do you think about fermented foods? Do you say that you should incorporate those things as well?
Yes, I would hold off on the fermented foods for a little bit because fermented foods can be higher histamine, which will impact your immune system, which can actually do more damage if your gut is really, really sensitive. So that doesn't mean that fermented foods are bad. It just means we need to hold off, right? Kind of like the salad and smoothie concept. So yes, I would say a really good probiotic. Um, I like the one from Just Ingredients as well because it has pre, pro, and postbiotics all in one. And it's a powder that you can just add to water and sip on it throughout the day with your electrolytes or whatever. You can also take probiotics from Needed or another brand that you trust. Um, I wouldn't get probiotics on Amazon if that's where you're looking.
Why not?
Um, we want to make sure that our companies are third party tested, non toxic, whole foods based, and that you can trace all of their ingredients and that they're transparent about their ingredients. So, yes, probiotic would be super great, especially if you had antibiotics. I recommend it to every mama, whether or not you had antibiotics, but especially if you had antibiotics. And then after a couple weeks, when you have really taken the time to be intentional about how you're nourishing your body, you've been taking your probiotics, you've been doing all the things to help your body heal and recover, then we can start incorporating those fermented foods um, because our gut can actually handle it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you touched on that because I did know that they were high in histamine, but it makes a lot of sense. Like I would have said, you can probably incorporate them right away, even with that being the case. But that was really interesting to hear that take on it and that it can affect your immune system and just the nourishing that needs to happen after having a baby, especially. And, let's kind of move into the postpartum period then. So we've talked about nourishing our bodies throughout these periods and now postpartum. What do you think, what are some of those common myths that we hear about postpartum nutrition?
Oh my goodness. First one is that, like I said, that salad and smoothies are
Yeah.
super great. They are great sources of fruits and vegetables, but they are really, really hard on our body right after we've had a baby. So let's put this in context. You've had a baby, whether it was vaginal or cesarean, you you birthed a human, you lost at least 500 milliliters of blood. If you had a cesarean, it was probably closer to a liter of blood. It's a lot. You lost a ton of blood. You lost an entire organ, the placenta, and now you have a wound the size of a dinner plate inside of your uterus. You also had your highest levels of estrogen, progesterone crash basically instantly. And so now your hormones are all out of whack. And on top of that, if you had a cesarean, you had an incision through 7 layers of your body that now has to heal at all of those 7 layers and close and make sure that it's going to keep you safe. And on top of that, we also have to initiate lactation. If that's, well, even if you don't want to breastfeed, your body is still going to initiate lactation and you're eventually going to have to like tell your body that you don't want to do that. But even like regardless, your body will initiate lactation because that's what we were biologically wired to do. So there is a whole slew of things going on with our body. On top of all of that, whether or not you had the most beautiful, empowering, pain-free, amazing delivery, it is still considered a very, very, very traumatic event by your body. And so your body is now activated, your nervous system is now activated, and it's in fight or flight. And unlike other times where you can just down regulate and kind of go back to normal, Studies are now showing us that we can stay in fight or flight up to a month after delivery just because we had a baby. Even if we feel amazing, even if bonding is going great, even if we have a great support system, that's how traumatic birth is on your body. And when your body is in fight or flight, it's not focused on digestion. It's not focused on absorbing nutrients. It's not focused on your immune system. All it cares about is your beating heart, your lungs, and how well your body can respond to immediate danger. So, with that context, that now shows us that our body can't handle every single food we give it. If we're giving it raw foods like salads or like even raw fruits, fruits are amazing, but raw fruits are cold and they're hard to digest. And so they're putting an extra burden on our body when our body is already overburdened. Smoothies are cold. Cold is really, really hard on your body. The only time I really encourage moms to have something cold is if it's your electrolytes and your water to stay hydrated. So when we're thinking about how to nourish our bodies postpartum, we want to be focusing on warm foods that have been cooked. So, cooked vegetables, cooked fruits, cooked meats, rice, bone broth, all of those things. And just trying to make sure that we are making digestion as easy as possible for our bodies. That is what is going to help us heal. Another thing I want to say, one of the biggest myths that I have to debunk all the time is that resting is not the same as healing. The fact that you are resting and doing less does not mean that your body is healing. It just means that you're giving space for your body to heal. Resting is passive, healing is active. And if it's active, that means we have to intentionally do things to promote healing. So that's why we have to be so intentional about our nutrition, because we have to actually give our body the building blocks to heal, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that was a great answer. Moving past that just a touch, and I love that we shared all of that, but I know that one of the most common questions as our bodies are healing, as we're feeling a little bit more like ourselves, and we've kind of got breastfeeding underway, is like, when can I start losing some of this weight? Right. So, like, paired with or like right next to that nutrition is how can I fuel my body properly and also let go of some of this extra weight while I'm breastfeeding. And if I do any kind of like quote dieting or anything where I'm changing my nutrition in order to make that happen, how will that affect my breastfeeding? How can we carefully do this? So, what and we're kind of fighting that bounce back culture and stuff, right, too. So like, what are your thoughts on this from a nutrition standpoint?
I would say that if you are breastfeeding in any capacity, whether you're combo feeding, exclusively breastfeeding, whatever, if you are producing milk with your body, you should not be intentionally trying to lose weight. Does that mean that weight loss is not an option or that it's not possible? No. But you should not be intentionally focused on losing weight. This is because your milk supply is more important than your weight loss. Now, there is a way to achieve postpartum weight loss safely without sacrificing your milk supply, without sacrificing your health. And that is approaching it through the lens of safety. If you can help your body feel safe, then weight loss will be easy. And I know that sounds silly because so many women struggle with weight loss, but I'm going to tell you right now, if your body is more worried about where your next meal is coming from, if you're going to get enough food throughout the day, if your milk supply is still okay, if you feel safe in your brain, if it has to worry about all those other things, it does not care about weight loss. So if you can help your body feel safe in all of those other areas, then your body can be like, sweet, let's lose some weight. And it really is that simple. I talk all about this in my Confident Mama Masterclass. We we dive deep into, are you familiar with Maslow's pyramid?
Mm-mm.
Have you heard of that? So Maslow created this hierarchy of needs. It's this pyramid. You learn about it in psychology, but it's this idea that we can't be our best self if our needs are not taken care of in the right order.
Hmm.
The very bottom tier is like, bare minimum food, shelter, water, right? And it goes up through this pyramid and explains the different types of needs that we have as humans. And you can't achieve the top of the pyramid if you're not meeting the needs at the bottom of the pyramid, right? So I take Maslow's triangle and I apply it to you as a postpartum mom. What are your needs at the bottom? Where do your needs fall throughout the rest of the triangle? And where does weight loss fit on the triangle? I'm going to tell you right now, it's at the top. So in my master class, what we go over is learning how to meet our needs in the right order in a way that works with our busy lifestyle as a new mom, so that weight loss is achievable, it's safe, and it's easy. So if you want to really, really understand how to do that, we dive deep into that in my masterclass. But I'll tell you right now, if you're breastfeeding, it should not be an intentional goal. If you are not breastfeeding, then I would say bare minimum 3 months postpartum is when we can start talking about weight loss, because we need to make sure that your body has had enough time to actually heal and recover before we start trying to shrink it down. If your body did not get the nutrients that it needed to rebuild and heal the wounds and kind of regulate your hormones and stuff, then trying to throw weight loss on top of that is just like too much. So I would say if you're not breastfeeding, minimum 3 months postpartum is when we can start thinking about that. And if you are breastfeeding, there's a way to do it. We just have to be very, very specific. And I talk about that in my masterclass.
I love that. Well, and I'll make sure to link that for everybody who is listening so that they can go and find you there and be able to do that. That's great. Well, and I think you kind of talked about that too, where you're like, if that first month you can still be in fight or flight, and you talked about, and your digestion slows down and like all these, like you're literally, your body's just trying to survive, then it's like, yeah, we're worried about all kinds of other things first. We've got to take care of ourselves first. As you were talking about that, I feel like I faintly remember hearing something about this pyramid, but I love that concept that like we have to take care of these base things first and then build upon it. That's something that we probably don't get into enough. And I know even like mainstream providers don't really touch on a lot. And that is how much stress affects our bodies. And I mean, to the point of making us critically ill. And yet and here in America too, so much is expected of us, and we expect so much of ourselves. I know I am completely guilty of this, right? I'm a mom, I homeschool, I run a business. I mean, I can like list off all the things that matter in my life and that I feel like define me or that need my attention. All the while, cortisol is raising and hormones are going out of whack and like all this stuff. And it's like, have we taken care of those base needs? And, starting with like the physical, like you were talking about food and stuff, but there's the spiritual side of things. There's like the mental side of things. We're a whole person. And so I think you talking about that is a big deal. And I mean, weight loss for everybody, it's a thing, right? It's on my list too. There's stuff that I've done for it this year specifically to help myself. And, but I love that you're talking about that. Like when we move from being pregnant and into that motherhood piece, there's a lot to focus on before we hit on those physical things. And so I think that was great and just so important for moms to hear. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I'll just put in this little plug right now for the moms that are like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'll tell you this much. I have had 3 babies and I've exclusively breastfed all of my babies. So no formula, no pumping, just exclusively breastfed. And on average, I eat about 2,800 to 3,000 calories a day. It's a lot of food. And I have been able to lose 25, 30 pounds every single time without actually trying to lose weight. I'm eating more food than you think. I'm exclusively breastfeeding. I run a business, yada, yada, yada. And I'm able to lose the weight. And it's because of that principle that I talked about of that pyramid that we talk about in my masterclass. So I'm telling you, it is possible. It is possible, but we just have to learn how to do it the right way.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
and as you're talking about this, the nutrition and stuff, I'm like, I gained a lot of weight with my pregnancies. I don't know exactly why, maybe because I'm a tinier person and they just needed a little bit more or whatever. But what was interesting is I know there are going to be women that can relate to this. So that's why I'm saying it. And there's no judgment here. But when I was like done being pregnant and I tried to be so healthy during those pregnancies, right? I was like, okay, I had my baby, like give me all the things, right? I want all the treats. I want all the sushi. I shoved it all in. And then I'm like, I missed out on this for 9 months. So let's go nuts. That's probably not helpful either. Right. Like, so there are like key principles there about like how we fuel our bodies and things that we take from our pregnancy that should follow us into our postpartum and stuff that can help with that as well. And then there's, some moms hold on to a little bit more weight while they breastfeed, and there's different ideas and reasons behind that as well. So, and a lot of that has to do with our nutrition, like, and how it was prior to pregnancy, during pregnancy, and into postpartum. So I just think, yeah, it all matters. And so I love that we're talking about it. How does our birth experience affect our postpartum like milk supply and stuff, as we're talking about breastfeeding and all of this, and vaginal versus cesarean? Do we see an issue or differences in milk supply regarding how our birth went?
Yes. You might not be surprised, but I get so many DMs all the time from moms that are saying, I don't understand why I have a low milk supply. I've been a low producer since day one. I'm so stressed. I don't know what's going on. And then I start to ask them questions about their birth. And I'm like, okay, well, you had a little bit of a birth experience. Have we talked about that? Have we tried to unpack that? Have we tried to let ourselves feel all the feelings that came with that? Well, no, I just needed to like get past it and just like focus on my baby, and then my husband had to go back to work and all these things. The stress from our birth 100% has an impact on our milk supply because lactation is not an independent biological process. It is interconnected to everything in our body, including our stress. And so many moms are stressed about other things. And then they're also stressed about their milk supply. And their body's like, well, I can only do so much if you're so stressed. Like, I can't produce all this milk if we're worried about all these other things. So, our birth experience totally has an impact. And that's not to say that if you had a traumatic birth that you can't have a successful lactation journey. But we would be silly to think that our birth experience does not impact our lactation journey. And if we can know that going into it and say, okay, I had a really difficult birth experience. I need to really explore all the feelings that came with that. And I need to support my body as it heals. And I need to have the tools in place to regulate my nervous system when I feel those feelings come up again. That is what is going to actually support your milk supply more than just hoping that you have an incredible experience. We know that mom's ability to have skin to skin and bond with her baby within the first 60 minutes of life has a really big impact on milk supply. So if you had a cesarean and it was emergent and there were a lot of complications, and maybe you didn't get to hold your baby until, I don't know, 90 minutes after they were born, that's really stressful, not just for you, but also for the baby. And that doesn't mean you can't be successful. That just means that we have to put in a little extra effort and maybe tweak some things to make sure that we're accounting for that. If baby had to go to the NICU for whatever reason, that's really, really stressful. And you might have to hand express and pump for a little bit until you can actually breastfeed your baby because they were in the NICU. That's going to affect your journey too. So, realizing that your milk supply is not just a matter of how many oats you eat, how many lactation cookies you eat, a result of all the different parts of your health. And if you can be confident enough to say, okay, I am going to try and take care of every part of my health, my stress, my physical recovery, my mental health, my spiritual health, and I'm going to try and nourish all of that, your milk supply will be okay. We just have to make sure that we're addressing all of those things.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it just a second ago, and my guess is you're going to say we're asking the wrong question. But one of the most common questions is when a mom is affected with milk supply is, how do I get it up? What do I need to eat? You know, you talked about lactation cookies and stuff. Like, how many extra calories do I need? Are we asking the right question? Are there foods that do help and encourage? And is it one of those things that, like, yes, they do, but these things need to be in order first?
Yes. So my response to that question, how do I get my milk supply up? You have to know why your supply is low in the first place. And I know that that sounds like so obvious, but nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about that. So if your supply is low, you have to know why it's low in order to know how to fix it, right? And I created this formula. It's called the flows formula. And it takes you through the 5 foundational things that impact your milk supply. F is for fuel, L is for latch. And yes, if you're a pumping mom, latch is still a thing. It's called flange. So that's a part of it. O is for oxytocin. W is for watch, meaning are we paying attention to changes? Are we paying attention to, things in our life, things like that? And then S is for sleep. And if you learn more about the flows formula, I have a free guide that you can download that goes in depth with all of that. But the idea is that you won't know how to increase your supply if you don't know why it's low in the first place. So if it is that you're under fueling, well, yeah, then eating more food is going to fix your supply in theory, right? I'm not saying this as like a definite diagnosable thing. Um, if you aren't eating nourishing foods and then you start eating nourishing foods, yeah, that's going to make your supply better. But if your fuel is all in place, eating more lactation cookies isn't going to fix the fact that you're stressed, the oxytocin, right? So if it's the oxytocin part of it that's the reason why your supply is low, then we need to work on that part of the formula. If your fuel and your stress are good, but it's actually like a mechanical issue where baby isn't effectively removing milk, well, then we need to work on that to see your supply improve, right? So if you're asking yourself, how do I fix my supply? Why isn't XYZ working? Why isn't the body armor? Why aren't the lactation cookies? Why is adding more pumping sessions not fixing it? I would say that's because you don't know why your supply is low. So grab my free guide, go through the whole thing and do an evaluation and see if you can figure out the area that you think you need to work on first and watch the magic happen.
I love that. How about, so now we've talked about a lot of things and I'm sure moms' heads are spinning. They're like, what if there's a mom listening right now and she's feeling super overwhelmed, particularly with postpartum? What is the most important thing that she can be doing right now?
Regulate your nervous system. And, when you hear that, you might be like, okay, well, yeah, I could take a few deep breaths. Yeah, that's part of it. Regulating your nervous system could also be getting sunshine, taking a hot bath, humming, stimulating that vagus nerve is going to be huge. Affirmations, being intimate with your partner, that regulates my nervous system. I don't know if that works for anybody else, but that's one of my favorite ways to regulate my nervous system. Um, and just really focusing on how you feel. If you feel like you're on edge all the time, if you feel like you are just go, go, go all the time, that's another sign that your nervous system is kind of having a hard time, is if you are just lightning mode all the time. You're bouncing from thing to thing, you're rushing all the time. Your body needs time to just be. So maybe giving yourself 5 to 10 minutes between all of your activities, all of your things on your to-do list, having transition time to be like, okay, I've completed this task. I'm going to take a second to regroup and then I'm going to move to the next task. that is also nervous system regulation. Um, so really focusing on how you feel. Something else I want to say, a lot of people think that we have to be in rest and digest in this happy place all the time. That's not what true nervous system regulation is. A regulated nervous system is one that is fluid and adaptable. So that means that if you are activated for whatever reason, your baby's crying, and all of a sudden you get stressed and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to fix my baby. But then baby's okay and your nervous system can down regulate and come back down. That is a regulated nervous system because it's able to activate and it's also able to down regulate and come back to its happy place without a lot of effort and without a lot of time passing, right? So being able to recognize that you're going to move up and down on the ladder, but that you can do it in a controlled way, in a timely manner, and you can come back to a sense of safety. So I would say nervous system regulation would be the biggest thing that you can do right now.
I love that. All right, Brooke, I've had you for a long time now, and you've given us a lot to think about and a lot of really good information. I want to thank you for that. Are there any final words that you want to say before diving into where everybody can find and connect with you?
You are doing so much better than you think you are, Mama. There are going to be so many people with unsolicited advice, so many mommy blogs, so many chat GPT answers, and all these people, they're going to overwhelm you and try and show you where all the gaps are and make you go down rabbit holes and all these things. And I know your brain is really good at that too, because my brain is. But you are doing so much better than you think you are. You were made to do this. You were created by God to be a mom. Your body knows how to create a baby. You didn't have to say, okay, let's get out the manual. And on day 3, we have to do this. No, your body knows how to do this. You've got this. And you've got us in your corner. You will be okay. Your baby will be okay. You are the best mama for your baby, and you are doing so much better than you think you are.
I love that. All right. How can people connect with you? And I will make sure you guys, if you are listening and you're already an email subscriber, you'll get all of the links and stuff that she talked about in the email for this week. If you're listening and you just want to grab those links, it's right below in the show notes, wherever you're listening to the podcast. So, Brooke, where can they find you?
You can find me at the wellnourished mama _ on Instagram. My website is thewellnourishedmama.com. And then I'm not sure when this episode goes live, but as of September 9th, my membership will be live. This is a one of a kind resource. If you think about all the pregnancy apps that you could download, it's always about your baby is the size of a strawberry this week. And here's the foods that you need to eat for baby, 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 baby. And then there's no postpartum app that like supports you through postpartum. My membership is all about mama. So it takes you week by week through your entire pregnancy, all of the questions that you have, all the resources that you need to thrive. It's got links for all my podcast episodes, my blog posts, my recipes, all in the right time, in the right place for pregnancy. And then it takes you through postpartum. It walks you through postpartum week by week. Here's what your body's doing. Here's what your body needs. Here's something you can listen to. Here's resources for lactation and breastfeeding. Here's labs that you can request from your doctor. All those things, I've consolidated it all into a membership, and it is on demand 24/7, no matter where you are in your motherhood journey. So that is going to be an amazing resource for you if you want access to everything in my brain and everything that I teach all in one place, right where you are in your motherhood journey.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brooke. You are a wealth of information. I'm so glad we could talk today.
Thanks so much for having me.